Hi everyone, and welcome back to a new video. For those of you who are new here, my name is Mara Firk and I'm a first year pharmacy resident. For those of you who are back, it's so good to see you again. Today I will be covering everything that I think you should take care of in October if you are in the process of applying for residencies. So if you haven't had a chance already, definitely go check out my last video. I talked about all of the things I would have taken care of in September. Again, this whole series is just to break things down month by month to make it a little bit more digestible and easy to follow along, since this process can be long and daunting. So if you haven't started there, definitely go check it out. I lay some of the groundwork for what I think is important, and I'll definitely be referencing that video throughout and building on some of the ideas I shared prior. So definitely check that out. But for those of you who have already seen it and are back again today, I am very excited to share with you all kind of what I did in October a year ago. And the first thing I want to talk about, and I think kind of the season we're moving into, has to do with conferences and seminars. And one of the biggest benefits of attending these showcases, if you will, there's so many different things people can call them: conferences, seminars, showcases, whatever it may be, is that it's an opportunity for you to get some face time with the programs you may be interested for residency, if you were currently a P3 or P4 looking to enter the cycle, or if you are a younger classman, if you're a P1 or a P2, it's a great way to kind of figure out how you would approach these programs later on down the line and get an idea of what the setup looks like, what you can look forward to, and how best to prepare. And so a question I've been getting a lot, for those of you who don't know, I'm based in California. I went to pharmacy school in California, and the big California-centered showcase, residency showcase that is, takes place in Anaheim, and it is the CSHP seminar. It happens every October to November-ish. It's the first week of November this year. I'll leave a link below for those of you who are interested in checking out more about it. But it's an opportunity for the California institutions to come set up a booth, and this year it will be in person, and be able to share what their residency is like. A lot of directors come, residents come, and for myself personally, when I went into pharmacy school, I decided to go to CSHP seminar as a P2, and then go to the large national convention called ASHP mid-year during my P3 year. And I went to a 3-year program, so I only had 3 years of pharmacy school. But I've been getting a lot of questions as to which one is more worthwhile. And for me personally, I think it depends where in your pharmacy journey you are. As a P2, I think a more local, or I guess a statewide seminar was a great intro into what you can expect at a showcase. It was an opportunity to meet a lot of the directors who are in the area, kind of feel out what the scene looks like in California, and get used to asking questions and what to expect and the pace and things like that. As far as mid-year goes, which is the national conference that takes place in one of 3 places each year: Las Vegas, New Orleans, or in Orlando, Florida. It was actually virtual since I was a P3 in 2020, and it will be virtual again in 2021. Personally, I feel like the biggest benefit comes from when you are in the process of applying to residencies. I know plenty of students who go their P3 and their P4 year because they want to get a lay of the land beforehand. Again, I did do it virtually, so there was a lot that I didn't have to navigate physically. But for myself personally, I feel like it was a great benefit for me to go and actually have questions, done my research, and really be trying to leave an impression, make an impression on the directors and other residents when it came time for applications to be submitted and for interviews to take place. And again, not to forget the overall goal of what it means to go to a conference, a seminar, a showcase, and it's really to gather information. You'll hear oftentimes a lot of people say, no one's gonna remember you. And to a certain extent, I totally believe that that's true, but you also don't wanna be somebody that leaves a bad impression, because you know those always stick with people. And while the best impressions may not always last, it's always worth a shot, because you never know what will happen in the long run. So for me personally, just being able to use those opportunities to gather more information, fill in the Excel sheet that I have with a little bit more so that I can add some program specific information into my letters of intent. That way that they know I took a look at their program, I spoke to people who are in their program, and I really know what I'm getting myself into, I found to be the biggest benefit. And if that whole long thing wasn't long and confusing enough, the TLDR, or the TLDL of it all would be that if you are an underclassman, if you're not currently in the process of applying for residencies, I totally recommend attending your local showcases, your statewide ones. I think it'll give you a great idea of what you can expect going into a larger scale type of situation during your final year of pharmacy school, such as going to ASHP mid-year. So that is my recommendation. Of course, do with that what you want, whatever would make you feel more comfortable. But that's kind of my 2 cents on where you should be looking depending on where you are in pharmacy school. The next thing I wanted to touch upon, quick reminder, as my program itself will be moving into recruitment mode, is that to continue to follow all of these different programs on social media. This is a great opportunity for you to not only get to know the RPD, but the other preceptors, the residents who are there, learn about their research projects, what their personalities are like, and it'll give you a lot more to be able to connect with these people when you have the opportunity to speak one-on-one, again, whether it be at a smaller showcase or even at ASHP. So you can never do too much research, and if you're going to be on social media, you might as well be able to kind of learn a little bit about the programs you may be interested in and may eventually be a part of later down the line. The next thing that's up is basically how to approach a showcase. So I talked a little bit about which showcase to go to and whatnot, but to approach a showcase and kind of how to get the most bang for your buck out of it, if you will, it really, again, depends where you are in pharmacy school. I think as someone who's not actively applying to residencies, it's a great opportunity to stop by booths, get some brochures, talk to the RPDs, kind of hear what their program is about. Ask any kind of questions that you may have on a global scale about what their residency may entail, certain rotations, what they can expect. But further down the line, when you are in the process of showing up to a showcase because you are in the cycle of applying for residencies, it's really important to follow some certain steps, in my opinion. Again, these are all my opinions, so when I say something super important, I mean, I found it to be really helpful and it's something I definitely want to pass along, but you by no means have to do any of this. So for me, just making sure that I go through my list here, my biggest advice when it comes to a showcase is to make a game plan. Part of the reason that I emphasize so heavily on having an Excel sheet that lays out all of the different programs you're interested in is because when it comes time to go to these showcases and put a face to a name, it'll be helpful to have all of your information in one place. And before you even go in, to look at who all will be attending and your game plan of who you want to hit up at their booth and when. So at ASHP midyear, since it was virtual, everything was on the platform. And although, again, it's pretty easy to navigate, I went in a couple days before the showcase just to see where everyone was located and understand how the platform would work. Again, there's nothing worse than having computer troubles or not being able to understand where things are or missing out on an opportunity simply because of time zones, because you didn't know where to go or how to get there. So all things to take into consideration is to understand where you're going and how to get there, and that'll help to alleviate a lot of the stress or a lot of the nervousness you may feel when it comes to wanting to make a good impression at these showcases. My next tip is to come prepared with questions. I cannot emphasize this enough. I was somebody who went to so many open houses, so many seminars, showcases, and I would come across programs for the second or third time, and I would be able to continue to run through my list of questions that would come up or that I had from my prior encounters. There is nothing worse than getting into a room with an RPD and blanking and not knowing any questions, and maybe even worse, asking a question that's very clearly already stated on their website. So be thoughtful, think about the things that matter to you as a resident, notice gaps or inconsistencies amongst programs. That way you can ask questions that will help you get more information. Something else I know I talk about on like an aerial view, that it's important to gather information, because not only do you want to find out if you're a fit for this program, but you want to find out if this program is a fit for you. It's totally normal to walk out of some scenarios and feel like this program isn't offering me the opportunities I'm looking for to become the pharmacist I want to be. And that's so okay. I think something that I realized in residency or throughout the process of going through residency that differed so much from pharmacy school is it truly is about matching who you are as a person to the type of program and what you want to get out of that program to become the pharmacist you want to be. And I think that's such a foreign concept, at least for me it was, because when we apply for undergrad, for pharmacy school, we're really just trying to get the training we need in order to make it to that next step. But as I'm currently in residency, literally right before my EDPM shift, it really is about fit. I am having the most amazing time, and I truly couldn't see myself at another program now. When I was going through the process, there were so many amazing ones I had the opportunity to connect with. But for me, I really did find my match, and I wish that was something that was more heavily emphasized as we go throughout this process, that'll make a world of a difference. The next thing I want to talk about is not only to come prepared with questions, but I think something that's really easy to do to help build rapport is to kind of pull at the threads that you're hearing in other people's responses. whether it be a resident, a director, a coordinator, whoever it may be, listen to the information that they're providing you. Don't get so caught up in jotting everything down or focusing on asking your next question so much so as really striking up a conversation. Again, when it comes to a fit, it's who are the types of people I want to work with on a day-to-day basis. Leaving a good impression means to not only show up to a situation prepared to ask questions, but also to be an active listener. And you oftentimes, and I found this to be the case, myself and my friends echoed this, is that you don't know what you don't know. And the great way to kind of get all of this information is to kind of go on a fact-finding adventure or treat all of these interactions as such, and really let the people you're connecting with kind of let you in on what they like about their program and start pulling strings. Ask questions about things you hear that they mention that you're unfamiliar with. That'll unlock so many doors. You'll be able to get a better idea of what a day-to-day looks like as a resident in that program. And again, it just builds rapport overall. So try not to get bogged down on asking all of your questions. Of course, that's super important and you should. But I think something that's important when it comes to really leaving a good and a lasting impression is to be able to build that personal connection with people. And that kind of leads into my last point, which is following up with thank you emails. So many people have so many different ideas and opinions about this, and I think every single one is valid because it's very much a personal choice. For myself, I just could not leave it alone. I felt the need to send a thank you email after the end of each seminar interaction, each showcase, whatever it may be. It was a quick little blurb, and I can leave an example below of what I would send. I would just go ahead, reintroduce myself, say thank you for their time, and express to them something that we had shared. And I think that was why I stressed so heavily building rapport, is that it's nice to be able to bring up something that you all talked about on a more personal level, or something that was a little bit more unique that they shared with you. That way, again, it helps to build this idea of who you are to them. And again, people may not remember who you are, and that's totally okay, but on the off chance that they do, you want to make sure that it's a good impression. And as far as timeline goes, I remember always thinking about this as well. I try to do within the next 24 hours, but so many of these open houses and showcases and whatnot just go one after the other, on top of the fact that you're an APPE student trying to take care of all of these different things. So I gave myself up to 48 hours to send a thank you email. I would try to draft them up as soon as a seminar or showcase was over, and then send them at a business hour appropriate time. If you have any of those applications that let you set your emails to be sent at a certain time, highly recommend that, because there were often times when I was drafting these emails at like 11 p.m. or midnight, and I was like, probably shouldn't press send right now. So I just set them up to be sent at 7 a.m. the next morning. My next piece of advice has to do with keeping all of your information in one place. I know I've alluded to this a bunch of times, but after a seminar experience, it is so easy to do everything, get all the info you need, send your thank you email, and then completely forget what happened, who you spoke with, what the information was that you gathered, what that specific example was. And so please, 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 for your own sake, please write it down. And I know it's so easy to be like, oh, I'll remember, like that was such a lasting experience, or that impression really stuck with me. But things start to really collide, and you want to make sure, especially if you are getting program specific letters, that you have your details straight, that if you were emailing people longer than a day after, if you're not immediately writing your email once you get off the call with them, that you remember the details correctly. So please write things down. It's going to feel like you have so much going on, but really it'll help you paint a whole picture when it comes to really deciding on where you want to go and where you want to apply. And so that's just a tip, because I feel like sometimes I'd be like, oh yeah, like I'll totally remember that. And then about 2 or 3 weeks later, when I'm going back to writing my letter of intent, or when I needed to figure out just some specifics about a program, I'd be like, I really wish I wrote that little thing that so-and-so said down, or even having their contact information, because a lot of times you have to dig for that info. So if you see it on a screen somewhere, it's someone's email, that's the person you're about to go into the room to talk with, just jot that down. That'll make that thank you email even easier. And then my next tip is to start emailing residency directors if you have questions about their programs, or if you're interested in their program. I think about October, I'd say the latter part of October is a safer bet, because a lot of program directors will be more in recruitment mode. Right now, they are still very much adjusting to having residents, especially larger programs, even smaller ones. Everyone has things going on. And so recruitment season, I'd say about last week of October, you can maybe get away with the second to last week of October. If you have program specific questions, if you're someone who's out of state and you want to learn more about maybe the licensure process or whatever it may be, whether you're in state and you just want to hear if they have this or that, Again, tips for that: do your research beforehand. If it's a question you can easily find on their website, you want to make sure you did your due diligence beforehand. And then from there, be professional in your email. Introduce yourself, address them, spell their name correctly, address them as doctor if that's their title, and to go from there. Again, I think it's a great way to get more information. If you do plan on seeing them at a later event, you can obviously hold off for then, but if you have some residual questions, all of the directors I had the opportunity to speak with always emphasize following up with emails with additional questions. So highly recommend, if you have more questions that you don't get answered in a particular scenario, never have to worry. You can always reach out whenever an email is most convenient. And then just to wrap things up, just some reminders from the last time on things you should be working on longitudinally, I guess you want to say, is your CV. Again, on my last video, I left a link to the UCSF Office of Career and Professional Development. They're a fantastic tool. My CV looks basically exactly like what they have on their website. And one of my tips for that is to kind of decide your headers based on what type of resident you want others to see you as. So I had a community focus, a clinical focus. I had a different type of teaching focus also for one of my headers. So something to consider, something to think about. Highly recommend having others look it over, whether it be a mentor, a letter writer, to get some input. So keep working on those. If you haven't caught up yet, definitely do that. If you're caught up, make sure it's formatted. So again, all you have to do is add in the remainder of the rotations you have for this year. My next tip is to start drafting your letter of intent. And I know that this sounds super, super early, and it very much so is. But again, this is for the month of October. So at any point in October, just draft something up. And the structure of a letter of intent can take many forms. I'll definitely go ahead and share my example in the next video. But something to keep in mind, and just a general flow for myself, was explaining who I was, what my credentials were, the things I did in pharmacy school that I felt like really stood out, and then why this program was a fit for me. And then, of course, just a closing sentiment. Again, I'll go more into that, but my first letter of intent that I sent along with all of my letter of recommendation materials was 2 pages, which recommendation is just 1 page, like one side of a page. And it looked nothing, absolutely nothing like my final product. But what it did was it gave my letter writers an idea of what I was looking for and what I had to offer as a future resident. So something to consider. I mention it in this video just because I'm the type of person who needs 2 weekends to finally build up the energy to sit down and write it down. So I just wanted you all to have it on your radar as something to consider, because as a little sneak preview for November, I will be recommending sending letter of recommendation materials by the 2nd week at the latest. So having a drafted letter of intent to send along with that material to help your writers, if you're able to work on that during October, you'll be in a really, really good spot moving forward. And then the last note is to keep a list of interventions. And I know many of you are on rotations, and it's hard at the end of every day to kind of sit down and really write out something thoughtful about all of these things. And my biggest tip would be to not. Honestly, at any point that you feel like you took part in an intervention or initiated a conversation or played the part in somebody's care that really stuck out to you, something that you really felt proud about, something you felt like really reflected who you are as a person, make a note of that. You don't need a million examples in order to show just what type of provider or future pharmacist you'll be. I use the same example throughout because for me, it was something that mattered to me. It was something that showcased what I thought I brought to the table as a resident, and it made a difference in a patient's life. It wasn't anything groundbreaking, it wasn't anything life-altering, but it was about making sure that a patient had care holistically. From the moment they came into the hospital, throughout their stay, mitigating some clinical issues, and making sure that their discharge and follow-up were followed through completely. I had a huge interest, and I do have a huge interest in acute care, but that doesn't mean that I don't care about my patients as a whole, from the TOC aspect to the community pharmacy aspect to the managing their care on the inpatient side. I picked an example that I felt like really showcased that, and that I felt really proud of, and that I could speak with enthusiasm about and share that experience with the interviewers who I had throughout this process. So just a little bit of food for thought. If you feel like you haven't, cured cancer yet, you probably won't. But just think about the types of interactions with patients that have really stuck with you, that made you smile at the end of the day and you were really proud of yourself for. And so that'll be the type of thing that you want to mention. And those are the type of interventions you want to jot down. No one's going to ask you if you've ever had to dose this or dose that. They'll ask you about a time that you made an intervention that meant something. And while I say do mention the ones that you're proud of, Also mention the ones where you were not accepted, your recommendations were not accepted. So again, just across the board, you want to have a plethora of experiences. So don't feel like you need a bunch in one particular category, the good, the bad, or the ugly. Try to have one good, solid one for each. And I'm confident that all of you who, if you're even looking at this video and watching, are very much motivated to really take this residency process by the horns. And so you'll definitely have examples for each of them. So don't stress yourself out. Again, each interview at the end of the day is a different interview. And so you can absolutely feel free to share the same examples across the board. And that will go ahead and wrap up today's video. I want to say thank you so much to all of you, honestly, who take the time to watch. Again, I hope that this is helpful to some of you out there. If you ever have questions, feel free to leave them below. You can always reach me on Instagram. I have my personal one at mayor.ferk, or I have my podcast if you want to listen to that on Spotify or Apple, Life on the Pharm. And I also have an Instagram for that at Life on the Pharm podcast. But until the next video, which I'm actually going to do an antimicrobial stewardship day of my life, that'll come out next. I hope you and your loved ones are staying safe and healthy. And if there's anything I can do to help, feel free to reach out. Thanks, y'all. Bye.